June 4th, 1944, somewhere near Saint-Lô, Normandy. Rain slid off the iron hull of a Panzer IV as Oberleutnant Karl Vetter leaned against its turret, a cigarette glowing faintly under his helmet brim. Around him, German officers joked between sips of black coffee, their laughter cutting through the fog. The Allied invasion, they believed, would come soon, but no one here feared it. The Wehrmacht had survived everything, from the frozen hell of Stalingrad to the burning sands of North Africa. The Reich's armored corps' Panthers and Tigers were the steel backbone of Europe. They were the hunters of tanks. The M4 Sherman? Just another prey. A toy tank, one Panzer commander scoffed. A coffin with tracks. They'd seen Allied propaganda photos. Shermans lined up like shiny parade cars, thin armor, a weak 75mm gun. The Germans laughed because they'd faced them before in North Africa. Shermans burned easily, their gasoline engines turning them into funeral pyres for the crews inside. To them, the Sherman wasn't a threat, it was a joke. But on the English coast, beyond the gray chop of the Channel, something monstrous was assembling. Rows of green machines Shermans, hundreds of them stood nose to tail on ships and landing craft. Mechanics worked sleepless nights, welding extra armor, waterproofing hulls. Air crews painted invasion stripes on wings. In the dark of the early morning of June 6th, the toy tanks began to move. Landing craft slammed against the beaches. The ramps dropped. Engines roared. Salt spray and machine gun fire filled the air. Tank after tank crawled into the surf, half submerged, treads clawing for traction. Many sank swallowed by waves or German artillery, but enough made it through. From his command post inland, Vetter peered through binoculars as smoke rose from the beaches. He saw Shermans rolling off landing craft, shells bursting around them, yet they kept coming dozens, then hundreds. The laughter stopped. He lowered his binoculars, eyes narrowing. They're still coming. By nightfall, the toy tanks had carved a foothold in France. But this was only the beginning. The Shermans would soon reveal their real strength, not in power, but in numbers, speed, and something far more dangerous: adaptability. The German officers still didn't know it, but in a few short days, their world was about to collapse under the weight of machines they once mocked. June 8th, 1944. 2 days after D-Day, the hedgerows of Normandy were alive with an unearthly sound. The deep, grinding hum of engines and the sharp metallic click of treads on soil. The Germans had expected the Allies to be trapped on the beaches. Instead, the ground itself seemed to crawl forward. From his Panzer command post outside Saint-Lô, Oberleutnant Karl Vetter could hear it before he saw it, that strange, relentless mechanical heartbeat. At first, he thought it was artillery rolling in. Then the horizon shifted. Green hulls emerged between hedgerows, one after another. It wasn't 5 or 10 tanks. It was hundreds. The Shermans were advancing in formation. There, 50 calibers sweeping the tree lines, their turrets swiveling like 100 blinking eyes. Behind them came the infantry, ducking in and out of cover, supported by fighter bombers that prowled the skies overhead. Every time a German gun fired, a P-47 Thunderbolt screamed down in response. The old German arrogance began to wither. The Tigers and Panthers still outgunned the Shermans, yes, but they were slow, precious, and few. For every Tiger destroyed, the Allies rolled in 5 more Shermans. For every Panzer ambush, American engineers cleared the wreckage overnight. Vetter's men fought from hedgerow to hedgerow, their 88mm cannons turning fields into infernos. Yet no matter how many Shermans they hit, more appeared from the mist, rolling through bombed-out farms, over walls, through trees. The battlefield was shifting from duels to floods, from skill to sheer volume. "Herr Oberleutnant," one of his crewmen shouted, smoke stinging his eyes. "We can't stop all of them." Vetter slammed the hatch shut as another shell screamed past. "Then stop the ones you can?" he snapped. But inside, he knew the truth. This was no longer a tank battle. It was an industrial war. While German factories struggled under Allied bombing, America was producing Sherman tanks faster than bullets, one every 30 minutes. They arrived by ship, by convoy, by endless streams of cargo trains. Soldiers joked that the Sherman wasn't a tank, it was a force of nature. And on that June morning, the Germans saw why. For the first time, the hunters felt like prey. Above them, the roar of P-51 Mustangs and Typhoons signaled the next phase. Not destruction from tanks, but from the skies. The ground trembled again, this time from above. June 10, 1944, near Villers-Bocage, Normandy. The air reeked of diesel and death, burnt grass, molten steel. For days, the German defenders had fought with desperate precision. Ambush, retreat, reload, repeat. The narrow lanes and hedgerows favored their smaller numbers. A single Tiger tank could hold an entire road. For a time, it worked. Then, the sky opened. At 11 a.m., the unmistakable whine of aircraft engines filled the valley. Vetter looked up from his half-track and felt the blood drain from his face. A formation of P-47, Thunderbolts swooped in, silver wings glinting in the sun. Each carried rockets beneath its wings and vengeance in its roar. The first salvo struck the tree line ahead. The blast wasn't a sound so much as a shockwave, hurling dirt, leaves, and shrapnel skyward. One of the Tigers erupted, its turret tossed aside like a toy lid. Men dove for ditches as more rockets screamed down, ripping through the hedgerows that once gave the Germans cover. Within minutes, the careful geometry of German defense dissolved into chaos. The toy tanks they'd mocked were moving freely now, darting through gaps, radioing targets to aircraft above. Every hill, every hedge, every farmhouse, the Shermans marked them in smoke for the fighter bombers to annihilate. This was combined arms warfare, the ultimate Allied advantage. Where the Germans had power, the Americans had coordination. And coordination was winning. Vetter crouched behind his Panzer IV, headset crackling with static. Command channels screamed confusion. Airstrikes on the left flank. We've lost contact with the 12th SS. The roads are gone, everything's burning. He looked eastward through the haze. For the first time, he could see how outmatched they truly were. Not because the Sherman was stronger, but because it didn't need to be. The Allies had turned warfare into an assembly line. The Germans were still fighting a war of craftsmanship, precision, and pride, while the Americans were fighting with factories, logistics, and speed. Somewhere behind enemy lines, General Erwin Rommel watched reports flood in. He had once called the Sherman a mobile coffin. Now, his own armored divisions were being buried under an avalanche of them. By sunset, the once confident German defense near Villers-Bocage lay shattered, roads clogged with wreckage. Smoke blanketed the horizon. Rommel's words that evening, spoken quietly to an aide, carried a weight heavier than artillery. "If this continues," he said, "Germany has already lost the war." And as the sun disappeared over Normandy, the laughter that once echoed through German camps was replaced by something colder: fear. June 18, 1944. Near Caen, France. The summer air hung heavy with smoke and diesel. The hedgerows that once gave the Germans cover were now tombstones for their armor. Tank turrets lay twisted in the fields, panzers blackened and silent. The laughter that had echoed just weeks earlier was gone buried under the thunder of Allied advance. Oberleutnant Karl Vetter climbed out of his crippled Panzer IV, the metal still hot enough to scorch his gloves. He could barely hear over the rumble of engines in the distance. It wasn't thunder. It was the sound of hundreds of Shermans and Iron Storm rolling toward Caen. He looked around. Fields churned to mud, trees splintered. bodies half buried in cratered soil. His men were gone. His radio was dead. The once mighty Panzer division had dissolved into fragments, outgunned, outflanked, and outnumbered. Vetter stumbled toward a ditch and dropped to his knees. In the valley below, a column of Shermans moved in perfect formation, 5 across, 20 deep, each one marked with white stars, their engines humming with eerie synchronization. The toy tanks were everywhere now, climbing hills, smashing walls, bridging rivers. He realized something then. It wasn't just the machines, it was what they represented. Behind every Sherman was a nation of factories, workers, and logistics, so vast it seemed inhuman. While Germany rationed fuel and recycled steel, America was producing tanks faster than Germany could destroy them. Rommel saw it too. Reports flooded in from across France. Armored divisions collapsing, supply lines cut, morale vanishing. The Atlantic Wall had failed. The Reich's armored fist was broken. In Berlin, Hitler raged at the maps that no longer made sense. He blamed his generals, the weather, fate itself, anything but the truth. The truth that was crawling across France on treads and determination. By the end of June, the Allies had broken through at Saint-Lô. Within weeks, Paris would rise in liberation. And somewhere among the wreckage of the Western Front, a German officer who once laughed at the toy tank sat in silence, watching a Sherman roll past. The tank commander inside tossed him a cigarette American brand. Vetter caught it, stared for a moment, then lit it with shaking hands. Smoke curled into the evening sky as the sound of engines faded westward. The war was not over. But for him, the illusion was. The toy had become the hammer, and Germany's pride had become its ruin. July 1st, 1944, Normandy, France. The fields were silent now, save for the occasional creak of a battered Sherman or the distant rumble of artillery. Smoke still rose from the villages, but the relentless roar of battle had shifted east. The Allies were moving, inexorable, as if guided by some unfeeling hand of fate. Karl Vetter walked among the wreckage, his uniform muddy, his face pale. Every hedge, every orchard, every farmstead he passed told the same story. German pride had met American industry, and it had not survived. He remembered the laughter of June 4th, the mockery of the toy tanks, and now he felt only disbelief that such a machine, so ridiculed, could unmake an empire. Reports from Rommel were grim. Panzer divisions were shattered, replacements delayed, and morale had crumbled. Commanders who had once boasted of invincibility now hid in dugouts, watching their carefully laid plans dissolve under the combined weight of steel, air, and ingenuity. Across Normandy, Allied soldiers pushed forward, not with the grace of elegance, but with the certainty of numbers. Every Sherman, every coordinated infantry advance, every airstrike reinforced one fact. Germany had been outmatched before it even fully realized the scale of the war it was fighting. Vetter paused by a shattered wall and looked westward, toward the beaches that had first brought the Shermans ashore. The toy tanks were gone now, part of a tide that had already moved on. But their impact remained, etched in mud, smoke, and memory. He could almost hear the laughter that had once filled the Panzer camps, now replaced by silence, the weight of a lesson learned too late. As night fell over Normandy, one thought lingered in the minds of the survivors. The tanks they mocked were not just machines. They were proof of a nation's resolve, its ingenuity, and its refusal to be intimidated. And in the end, that resolve had rolled through hedgerows and fields, crushing pride, arrogance, and the illusion of invincibility. For Karl Vetter, and countless others who had once laughed, it was a revelation as bitter as any shelling. Sometimes, the smallest thing mocked can carry the heaviest hammer.